Jill, thanks for chatting with me here today. So we've got a busy week that we've got ahead of us with everything going on with both the Reagan Forum and then with the roundtable we're doing through. So walk me through what we've got on tap.
Yeah, so every year, Defense News, of course, goes to the Reagan Defense Forum out in Simi Valley. This year is no exception. A couple of the big topics that I think reverberate and I think that we're going to really be focusing on is one is innovation. It's in and around Silicon Valley. So it's appropriate that there's a bit of a focus on that effort that is constantly happening by the Pentagon to link up more with the tech community. We did, you remember well, a roundtable last year where we looked at a bit of that cultural clash between the traditional Silicon Valley company and DoD and how they develop software differently and so forth. This year, we're doing another roundtable and looking instead at kind of the economic factors, how the tech community relies on venture capitalists, angel investors to really kind of invest in the big ideas. And DoD doesn't necessarily meld well with that model because it's about really kind of getting a return fast, and we know that never happens in DoD. So we're going to be looking at that to see if we can even come up with some brainstorming ideas, talking the tech community with DoD and so forth. And at the same time, Reagan is actually doing a panel on that topic as well, which will be great because they also recognize this as a priority area. So that's just one of the areas that we're looking at.
So it's been a year since we last really kind of discussed the tech. What change have you seen in that year?
So if you look at staying with innovation, I think has been an understanding that a lot needs to change in how DoD buys, how DoD develops. And so now the conversation is shifting where everyone's a little sick of talking about why these two groups can't get along and can't get on the same page. And now it's more a matter of, okay, what can we do on both sides? What can the tech community do to kind of evolve and move forward? What can the Pentagon do to make it easier to draw that talent in? Looking more broadly at Reagan, of course, I think we'll have also a bit of an evolution in discussion. China is going to remain a huge topic of conversation as it was last year. But I think we're moving on from, competing on technology to looking at, the way that the U.S. functions and develops its own capabilities and leveraging what we are capable of doing rather than just looking at, China is a totalitarian government that can kind of force development to support the military. We're now looking at, how can we take advantage of our allies and so forth to really kind of leverage the capabilities we have through ourselves and NATO.
And just looking at the forum itself, packed lineup, one current, two former Secretary of Defenses on the schedule, National Security Advisor, all four service chiefs. Reagan just seems to be getting bigger and bigger every year. What's your take on the evolution of the event?
It does. I think part of it, this year is particularly big. I remember last year we felt like there wasn't much international presence. It seems that there's a little bit more international presence this year.
Panel this year.
Yeah, an entire panel that actually last year they had one without any international representation. This year they do.
That was pretty entertaining last year.
I think part of the reason is that we're at a bit of a crossroads. We have elections happening in 2020, which is going to be key in the U.S., important elections happening, as we speak over in Europe. The budget is still in a bit of this crossroads, as it somewhat always is. But there's a lot of uncertainties now. The relationship with allies, the U.S. and allies, is still also a bit complex. So there's a lot to talk about, for lack of a better word. And you have to keep in mind, too, we're on our way to Reagan, but right now there is the NATO meeting in London where you have many of our allies sitting down and talking about 2020 priorities for NATO. So, it seems globally to be a time frame where there's a lot of decisions to be made and a lot of evolution in terms of priorities.
So lot's been happening. The 7-day span is going to be incredibly busy and a lot going on. And finally, is there one thing you're kind of most looking forward to about this year's Reagan Forum beyond the view we get out the balcony?
The view may be a little different after the fires. So what last year it was as well. But in terms of looking forward, I think my favorite part of Reagan is there are certain events throughout the year where you feel like leadership, whether it be industry, whether it be defense, is a little more at ease and seems to have their guards down, even around reporters like us. So it's a nice opportunity to just have really very candid conversations, to intermingle with our peers, and it's one of those rare opportunities that I always look forward to. So I'm sure it'll be that again.
We're gonna have a good time. Thanks for the time,
You
Jill.
will.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.